If you're at a stage right now where you're kind of just working and you're doing just fine, feel free to keep working while I go through this. I'm going to start catching up to you all now and show you how I would do it. And I know that most of us have had a conversation here about how I would do it, but let's get it on record so that you have a reference. So the task at hand is to create this element right here, and we're going to place this construct inside this space here, and we're going to cover 35% of the courtyard space. The first thing I want to do here is construct it off of the bottom curve, and there are some differences there between what I showed you on screen here. So I'm only going to construct one curve. Okay, so right off the bat, the first thing I need to do is just make a simple curve that goes through the space. I can design parts of it later, but I'm just going to do something like this for now. I'll probably do it a little more extreme, so whoops. Pull that out that way, pull this one out that way, maybe something like that. Okay, so this curve is going to have to get referenced in. So I'll set one curve, I'll place it here, and then I'm pretty much off to the races, right? I'm going to start developing it as a skeleton. Okay, so rather than extruding a positive geometry and then tilting that thing down, if I do it as a skeleton, then I have the ability to control it as a point-based operation, which is a little bit more structurally accurate. So that means that if I'm working in points and lines, the first thing I want to do is divide the curve into the points that I need. So division and divide curve is essentially going to give me those points. I'll develop a slider, 0 to 20. I'm not sure how many of these there are going to be. So I'll put it at something like 10. Don't worry about K. So with this list of points, the part that I think we struggled with is figuring out how do I create the rotational factor, right? Because the masts are going to go up, and I said that it can go a positive 15 degrees and a negative 15 degrees, and I don't want any of them to be at the same angle. So we're going to need to generate a list of rotational numbers. That part's fine, but what most of us did is we moved the points vertically, and then we took that line and we rotated the line, which is fine. So the way I'm gonna follow along with what you guys did, except the only difference is rather than rotating the line, I'm gonna rotate the point and then construct the line. So transform Euclidean. I'm gonna move this list of points, and I'm going to move it along the z-axis direction. I know I don't really need the unit z because it's already going in the z direction, but I'll put it in there anyway. And with the slider, I mentioned that this is going to be something like a minimum of 15 feet high, so I'll do 15 to 25 just to be safe. Something like 20 to start. Okay, so I have my points. I need to create a rotation, but which rotation do I need? This is something that I think hung us up a little bit. So under transform and Euclidean, there are 4 options. We have rotate an object in a plane. We have rotate, this is rotate also in a plane, I think it describes it as, but it's sort of like a one plane to another. And then this is rotating around a vector, and this one is rotating around a line. You might think that because these points are on a line that the rotate axis would be appropriate, but the line is not a directional line. It's a curved line, and so it doesn't really have a rotational vector around it, so you'll get an error there. So the one we want would be rotate an object in a plane, because we have the we have this very nifty tool under curve and division called Perp Frames, which basically sets us up a perfect relationship between the frames that it creates along the curve and the plane or frame that it needs in order to generate the rotation. So Perp Frames is going to require the curve that you're creating frames along. That's this. The number of frames or segments that you're generating, and that would be this number right here. I'll put that there. Yeah, so that's it for Perp Frames. And then the rotation in a plane is obviously going to rotate the moved points. That's these, so I'll rotate those. And it's going to rotate it in the planes that we've just created. So that's this frame list output right there. And you'll see that those points get thrown down on the base plane there. And then my last task here for the rotational element is to generate that list of numbers. So I mentioned that it can be a minimum of 15, maximum of 15 degrees in either direction. So with that, I'm going to create a range of numbers, not a series of numbers, because the range of numbers will be able to say no matter how many of them I have, I'm going to equally space it in between these two numbers. So range, and that's going to require a domain plus a count of steps. So I'll go to math domain, and I will construct a domain for it. That's this. Let me pull this back here actually. And then the number of steps is going to be the 10, the same 10 that we plugged in before. So the domain then is simply put going to be my negative 15 to 15. So negative 15 as a minimum, and then positive 15 for my maximum. So that's a range of numbers. I need to convert it to radians in order to plug it into the rotate, and so I'll go to math, trig, radians, and then plug it into angle. So here you see that it's kind of leaning slightly to the right there, and then by the time you get down to the other end, it's leaning slightly to the left here. Okay, now might be a good time to turn off some of your old stuff. Perp frames you don't have to have on. Your moved points, you can turn those off. Okay, so this is essentially going to be what we're using to generate the line work for our pipe. And so I'll just go to curve line, and I'll take the base points here as my first point, and then my newly rotated points here as my second point, and those are going to be my mast center lines. Any questions? No? Okay. So that pretty much completes the idea of the mast center line. Let's move forward into trying to create that boom arm skeleton center line, and then after that is when I suggest we start moving into making it a solid.